Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And we are pumped up that you're with us today. Mark, we are rounding out the final turn here of the first quarter of the year. It's hard to believe, but we're coming in hot here to the end of March. We maybe shouldn't date this, but we're 2025 into March coming up in a couple of weeks. And it's got me thinking about some adjustments that I want to make. So I want us to take a few minutes today, and I'm guessing some people are listening. They're maybe not thinking about this enough. I'm not thinking about it enough. And I want to have a little conversation today about what would we do at the end of the first quarter to adjust going into the second quarter of the year. And it made me think there's all this March Madness they're talking about, tournaments coming up. And, you know, college basketball, they play halves, Mark. But back when I was a coach, I was coaching high school, and I always loved that we had 4 quarters of the game. But there's a couple minutes left in the first quarter. I started thinking about, what do I want to say? Yeah, I'm going to have 90 seconds, to talk to this team at the end of the first quarter. What would I want to say to them going into the second quarter? What adjustments do we need to make? So I know we got a couple of weeks left here before the end of Q1, but I'm guessing there are some people who need to give a little bit of thought to what adjustments they want to make before we hit April 1st, right? If we want to make sure that we're locked in, ready to double down. And I know you and I have the advantage, and I'm guessing lots of our listeners do as well, but you and I for years have had an annual plan that sort of drives our thinking. And I want to give a little twist on maybe that. You know where I'm going at the end today. We've got a book I want you to think about. But as we think about our annual plan, Mark, we're Q1 almost over. Let's have a little accountability conversation here. How's it going so far for you this year?
Well,
what are you doing? What are you learning? Let's talk about that.
All right, I'll answer your question, but I want to say another word of introduction here. Yes, you referenced that we have incorporated the discipline of annual planning in our lives for many, many years. If you've not done that, I don't want you to disregard what we're going to say. Whether you have a written plan or not, I think we're still going to give you some things today that might help you improve the balance of your year. I think it was Socrates. You'll have to check me on this, Randy. But he said the unexamined life is not worth living. In fact, now I think it might have been Aristotle. I get those guys confused. But one of those old, wise Greek guys said the unexamined life is not worth living. And so hopefully we'll poke and prod you just a little bit to look at your first quarter. And you've heard me and Randy say this, if you've been with us for any number of episodes, that you want to learn from the past, but you don't want to live there. And so I love your question. How's it going? What are you learning in the first quarter? I think both of us have probably learned some things. I think it's going really, really well. As I look at my life in total, I've actually had a chance to do a couple of trips. I did one with my wife, which was outstanding. We went to Patagonia. I highly recommend it for any of you that have not been to that part of the world. And we did 6 days of hiking, which was fabulous. And then I got to go with our grandchildren ski. And they are 5, 7, and 10 years old. And I don't know if you've ever been on the mountain with little ones like that, but that was a memory that I'll have really for the rest of my life. So on that side, things have been really, really good. How about you?
Yeah, that's great. I'll answer the question as well. I'll build on something you said. I would just remind anybody listening, if they don't have an annual plan, I don't think it's too late to start one, Mark, or to think about what you want to accomplish the rest of the year. You don't have to think about the next, quarter. I mean, let's think about, it may be a little bigger. And maybe to help them do that, you and I did, I'm not even sure the dates. We could maybe put this in the show notes, but we did several episodes on planning. It would have been back in the fall, November, December. And so if they want to go back and listen to some of that content is all there that sort of walks them through some things that they would need to be thinking about to create that annual plan. I'm kind of with you. It's been a really great start to the year. I've been excited. I think one of the things that's helped it be a good start is that I've had a plan. I do think it was Aristotle who said that. It was one of those Stoics for sure. But it was a really great start to the year. I would say one of the things that has been a priority these first few weeks has been I wanted to prioritize my strength a little bit this year, and so I've had a couple of things that I've specifically done to try to get stronger. I need to do that as we get older. I've been working on that, so that's been good. There's a couple of areas, though, I would say in my, if I just take that one area of my fitness, that I need to make a couple of adjustments. I'm thinking about that already. So relationally, same thing. We've had a great time. We had a couple of birthday parties with grandkids. We've just found out a few weeks ago we're having another grandkid in the summer, so that'll be number 9 on the way. And
Number 9, right?
It's crazy.
You have a bunch of birthday parties.
It's gonna be a bunch of. It's always a birthday. We have 3 actually in the month of March. So we got in 2 weekends we're going to one, and then the weekend after that one. So it's kind of wild doing a lot of that. But yeah, there's some great stuff going on. Work wise, I've been excited about some of the impact that we've had. I was up with one of the companies we work with up in Ohio a couple of weeks ago, spent a couple of days up there, did a workshop and a keynote the following day, and all their leaders, which was really great. Got to meet some new folks that I had not done. And I was really glad actually to come home. I think it was 2 below the temperature in Ohio. So there's a reason I like living in Georgia. It was good to visit, but I was really glad to come home as well. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that's been happening. I've been asking myself, what's maybe missing, in the first quarter. And I want to dive into some of that. Actually, what got me thinking about this was a couple of weeks ago, we had the time change, and it, we fast forwarded the clocks, and my mind just was like, this time change has me all whacked out. And it made me start asking the question, what change do I need to intentionally make? The clocks go forward every year, a couple of times, go forward or go back. And I don't know that really ties into this, but it made my brain start thinking about what changes do I need to make in these different areas of my life. So I want to dive into some of those today and just see where this conversation takes us. I think we'll give some good ideas to our listeners, and maybe even some good ideas from each other here that we get. So if you're game, let's dive into this.
Yeah, but let me share 2 more macro observations just from my first quarter for what it's worth. I believe that portions of my plan were the most aggressive in my life. And I've been doing this personal planning I was trying to figure this out, probably 3 decades plus, probably close to 4 decades. And so I'll give you one example. I have this personal aspiration to be younger next year, biologically, based on the science and strength and all the other things that you would put in an index to determine your relative youth and vitality. And in my plan this year, I said I would do 6 workouts a week. And I knew that was going to be hard. And here we are at the end of the first quarter, and it's been really, really hard. And it's been sort of hit or miss. I looked at my calendar this morning. I was at the gym this morning, and I've got 4 sessions scheduled this week. Now, it remains to be seen if I'm going to get 2 more in. But here's my cut, and I'm not trying to project. You guys may see this differently, but I actually like an aggressive plan, because if my plan said work out, well, then if I worked out, ever, I would say done. Or if it said work out twice or 3 times a week, I might have a higher batting average, but I'm actually working out more than I have in my entire life. And it's being driven. I'm being pulled by the goal. And so again, we'll get to the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. But I'm younger today than I was this time last year. And I'm still on that journey. And part of that for me is the exercise piece.
I love that.
Loving the aggressive goal.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're doing that. And one of the things I would just affirm there, and for anybody listening, is I like that you have it measurable. I mean, we always talk about our plan. It's great to have a plan, but if it's just a plan and there's really no way to tactically measure that. And so before we jump into some of these ideas, it needs to be measurable. And I'm going to share something at the end today, Mark, that I think will be will affirm what you're saying from, we have a book of the week that we typically recommend. And I've got one today that I'm going to talk about at the end.
All right.
And it'll throw a little gas on the fire that you're talking about right there. Something that you said,
All right.
we'll save that to the end, but yeah, I love that it's measured.
So I got one more macro lesson, and it ties into exactly what you just said. My scorecard is inadequate. It's incomplete. And I'm still trying to figure it out. And it's crazy. I've been trying to figure this out my whole life. And so maybe some of our listeners will call us or email us or text us and give me some breakthrough here. But I've got and I should know this number, but I've probably got 30 things in my plan that I can track, weigh, measure, count. But my scorecard doesn't include all of them. So it's easy to look back and say, yeah, I went to the gym all these days, or how many rounds of golf I played. By the way, I've played 5, so I'm not on pace to play my 25 rounds this year, which would be twice what I played last year. So I feel good. I've gotten 5 in the first quarter so far.
Well,
so some of those things are
hang on.
Track.
I'm going to interrupt you here, and I'm going to bust you a little bit on that one, because you played 4 of them in a 4-day trip we had. So you got it. Yeah, you do need a little more consistency there for sure.
What? But I want to play 25 times this year, right? So
well, you're gonna need a few more golf trips. If you're gonna attack it the way you are, you're gonna need a few more golf trips. So,
well, maybe that's my answer. I don't know. The point is, those kind of things are easier to track, and the golf example specifically, because I'm putting my scores in the handicap system, and so it'll tell you how many rounds played, this, that, and the other. Yeah. And I can count how many times I went to the gym, or how many times I, went for a walk with my wife, because that stuff's on my calendar. But other things, I have not yet created a comprehensive way to assess and track my progress. And I know that when I'm counting it and measuring it and am accountable to the scorecard, I'll do better. So I'm still working on that. And now here at the end of the first quarter, that's been one of my revelations. Not particularly insightful, but it's something I need to work on for the second quarter. And so I'm going to be trying to refine at least what are some of those other critical metrics. I mean, you could argue I should track everything in my plan, but there's a lot in the plan. And so I don't yet know that I want to say, here's my scorecard for these 30 items. That feels a little unwieldy. But that may be where I land. Because at the end of the year, I'm going to be trying to assess all 30 items. And if I don't actually know how I did on those 30 items, then I'm going to be sitting here in 9 months going, I didn't really track that well. So measurement drives performance. And having the goal is great. But I've got to do more work on actually tracking.
You might consider, Mark, I know you've got, maybe let's say you use 30 as a placeholder. You got 30 things. Maybe once a week you look at the 30, and then you have 4 or 5 key metrics that you look at every day. I don't know. I know you review your plan every day, and that's been one of the things that's actually helped you be successful is or stay true to your plan. You've talked about the amount of times you look at your plan, the performance goes up, right? So that might be helpful to think about it that way.
Let me say a word about that for those that haven't heard us talk about that before. You gave me the idea that you said, hey, an NFL playbook might be this thick, but the coach often has a card on the sideline with the plays that they're going to run that day. And of course, they're represented in an abbreviated format. And so what I've done is I've created, in essence, a 1-page summary of my plan. And that's what I review every day. Now, so there's a great example, though. How many days have I actually reviewed it? I reviewed it this morning. Did I review it yesterday? I don't remember. I think I did. How about the day before? So that's a good example of, do I literally need to, on my calendar, just put a tick mark every day I review my plan? I don't know. Those are some of those tactical things that I'm still working on.
Yeah, I want to build on that from the coach's perspective. Let's go back to my coaching, perspective. We have a game plan. We go into the game and things get going, and literally we get hit in the mouth. The other team's really good, or we're somebody gets in foul trouble, or somebody's injury takes place. I think in the same way, there are people listening right now. The first 3 months of their year, maybe there's been unexpected resistance. It's the markets. I mean, I think it could be all kind of things. Some family crisis, something. And I think it's so easy when things get hard to just throw the game plan out the window and think we got to do something different. And that there is some we need to change, but I think having a plan gives us something to root back to. We're really trying to do what we're supposed to do, not adjust every day. You just can't fly by the seat of your pants, I believe, and get to where you want to go. And so I want to just encourage anybody who's listening, if you've had some resistance these first few months, that's not a reason to abandon your plan. That might be a reason to double down on it. So I'm not sure where that'll land with everybody, but I just wanted to say that and remind people that, there are areas in my own life where it's like, this has not been easy so far, and I'm going to have to make an adjustment, or I'll just head on down this road that's not easy, and that's not where I want to end up. So I think that's an important reminder as well. Okay, so let me give you a few areas here, Mark, to think about. I wrote down 5, maybe a 6th. I've got a 6th possibility, but let's just start with physically. You've talked about it already. I've talked about it. It's one of the things in our plan. Oh, anybody listening, how you doing with your sleep? How you doing with your nutrition? How you doing with your exercise? And when you say exercise, we could explode that out to, mobility and stretching and strength training. And there's several areas. Like, what do you do when you go to the gym? I'm sure you don't do the same thing all 6 days, Mark, if you make it to the gym all week. So I want to just remind people, you get to choose what you invest your time in physically, but the time change, they say, waxes out our circadian rhythm, all that stuff that, light and dark, and it regulates us. And I think if we're not careful, our sleep, it's a good reminder that our sleep, we don't value that enough. We're dehydrated. Most people are, statistics would show. And so there's just, I don't think we're going to really have the life we want if we don't pay attention to the engine, so to speak, or the body that we have to get us through the day. And so I like that you said that you're working on being younger next year. I'm not sure if we've referenced it or not, but there is a book called Younger Next Year, really great book that we've read together, actually, and some helpful thinking there. But I think physically, Mark, that's an area that every leader needs to be thinking about. Am I fit to lead, so to speak? And when I say fit, I'm talking about physically fit. There's some other areas we'll jump into here, but this is a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may want to find somebody to do that with you, a neighbor, a friend, a colleague, a stranger. You may want a coach. Any number of ways you can approach it, but I think you'll find it's harder not to go when you're going to meet or supposed to meet someone at the gym.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, here's the second area. For me, I've been thinking about this area. Most people will, lock in here, but there's a chance that some people haven't really thought about it enough, and their relationships aren't where they want it. That's the relational area. To me, this is a big one, because our lives are really, in a lot of ways, they're about relationships. They are built to be lived in community. We're better together. We say that all the time. Isolation is an enemy of a leader. Of a good, effective leader. They're just not living in isolation. I've heard you say before, I've said it before, the goal's not to get to the top. Everybody says it's lonely at the top. The goal is not to get to the top by yourself. The goal is to get to the top with your team, your organization, the people around you, your family. It shouldn't be lonely at the top. And so I've got a thought or two about that. I don't know. You have anything relationally you want to talk about?
Well, I think let me see how to say this. If we're not careful, it's considered extracurricular, or it's if we have time, or it's a bolt on. It's in my plan, and this may sound crazy to some of you people who are really, really relational. We often talk about, our fundamental of leadership is that you would value results and relationship. Well, I've spent my whole life kind of trying to compensate for a results orientation. And one way you do that is you elevate those activities that will foster relationships. And so I actually have it in my plan that I'm going to do something with a member or members of my family every week, because literally I could get to the end of the week and realize it didn't happen for any number of reasons. So I think we just need to all embrace this idea of being as intentional about relationships as we are performance.
That's a great reminder for leaders, because you always say, and you've written about this before, that most of us have a bias. I mean, I say most of us because I think it's like 1% of people are sort of split down the middle with relationships and results, but most of us lean either toward relationships or we lean toward results. And I would say to the leader listening, we would say value results and relationships. We use the word results first because you are in the results business. If you're in business, you've got to get results. I get that. But if you forget that you're in the people business and you don't compensate for you're leaning that way, you're going to have a hard time building to your potential. And so I like that. I want to say a word here about communication when it comes to relationships. For me, I ran across something, and I've got to think about this more, but I ran across this imagery last week. This guy was talking about, if we're in a conflict, we're communicating and we're in a conflict. He talked about how there's a rope. Think about it. Maybe a better way to think about it will be like a shoestring that has a knot in it. And he said a lot of times when we approach those conflicts, that we'll just pick up one end of the string, and our wife, let's say, or our coworker or whoever, they pick up the other string, and we want to begin to pull on it, and that just makes the knot tighter. He said if we can approach those conflicts relationally and realize that our job together is to unravel the knot and make sure that we get it back. I just thought that the approach to conflict is so good. So many times I run into these situations and I'd rather be right than get it right. And I want to make sure that, especially the people, well, not just the people closest to me, but when you start there, you want to make sure that you're treating them the way you need to be treating them. And you can say hard things, but you don't have to say it in a harsh way. And so I think relationally, this is a big one as well. I've got a relationship in my life right now that I'm actually need to put a little more time into. That's another example. You just made your relationship's not where you want it to be because you hadn't put a lot of time on it. And that time on the relationship can really, I know it'll resuscitate it, but I say resuscitate. It's not dead. It just needs some time. I've got one that I'm wanting to focus on here as I go into this next quarter. And so, I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be really good, but I think so many times it's easy to just be going through the motions relationally. And you alluded to your family, spending time with them each week. If we're not careful, we'll be with them and not really be with them. And so I think this is one for every leader listening. What could you do relationally to make a change or to invest in, someone, maybe encouragement? Somebody needs some support. Somebody might need even a challenge, but how we go about that to make sure that we're relationally going where we need to be, I think is important. Okay, let's think here. This might not be an easy one for us, but let's think. It's important for all of us to think emotionally. What changes do we need to make emotionally? And I wrote down a couple of thoughts here, Mark. I'd love to get your take on this. I like the idea of a gauge, like on your fuel gauge on your car. How's your tank right now? Are you emotionally full? Or, I'm guessing people are listening and there's some people going, I'm maybe half a tank. And then there might be some people listening, even with only 3 months into the year, but they're going, I'm already running on empty. And there's some things that are draining me. I'm not spending a lot of time on things that bring me joy, bring me life. I think the emotional side of leadership, a lot of times we want to pretend we have it all together, but this is an important area to focus on, Mark. If we're going to really be effective leaders, the people around us are going to need to borrow some of our strength. We've got to be strong enough for ourselves and the people around us. It's why self-leadership really, I believe, is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. We wrote about this a little bit in Smart Leadership. And for those that may not have read that, it's a book on leadership effectiveness in essence. And one of the things we talked about is the way the brain works. And some of you may know this. I think you all know it experientially, whether you thought about it or not, is your ability and my ability to respond to the challenges that we have. They all find their source in our store of energy. And in our brain, it acts like I think the term might even be a substation in electrical systems, where it's going to route the energy. And what actually happens is it routes it in a predictable order. The first thing that we are given energy for are the physical tasks that we are expected to perform. The next are the thinking tasks, Third are the relational tasks. And then fourth are those activities requiring emotional engagement and empathy. And so a lot of leaders, a lot of humans that struggle with emotional engagement and empathy, it's not even their wiring. It's not even their DNA. It's just they don't have adequate stores of energy, which is why we have been advocates for years about leaders particularly and leaders specifically. We've got to be sure we have enough energy because we're required and expected to perform on all four of those levels.
That's fantastic, Mark. It's easy to think about if we're doing what we should physically, that would increase our energy. But let's even tie in our last one relationally. I'm guessing everybody listening, there are some relationships that drain you more than others. And then there's some relationships that are life-giving. And I would just ask anybody listening, have you been spending enough time with the people who are life-giving? And so we can tie some of these in together, but I love having that storehouse of energy to be able to meet the demands of the day. I think that's great.
Well, okay, I'll tell you a real practical way this plays out, a real practical way that it shows up in my life. I can think of many times when I gave it all at the office, right? I did the physical and the intellectual things required of me. When I got home, I had nothing left, nothing for relationships and nothing for the emotional engagement that my family needed and should have did expect from me. So that's been just another motivator for me to try to be a good steward of the energy, which goes back to, are you getting enough sleep? Are you hydrated? Are you exercising? All of that, those are the levers that we can pull to bolster our energy. And that's why we want to bolster our energy.
That's great. Okay, we have a couple more here. So let's think mentally here, Mark. When I say mentally, I'm not talking as much about the mental health. Maybe we need to do something on mental health. I know the stats show that a third of people right now are struggling with depression or anxiety or clinical stress. I mean, it's real. I mean, there's no question about that. When I'm saying mentally right here, I want to talk about what are we doing to grow the way we think. And I'd love your take on this because you talk a lot about the importance of personal growth, reading, margin. Will you get into some of that, just the power of those things on your plan? I mean, like it's easy to say I want to read, but then where does it fit on your plan, on your calendar? I mean, it can be on your plan. It's got to transfer. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the importance of growth and the mental side of our leadership.
Yeah. And I'll just say a word. I think for most of our audience, this will be review for sure, but leaders are learners. One of the heart habits that we talk about is a hunger for wisdom. Well, wisdom is not just learning, but learning is a component of wisdom. And you meet a great leader and he or she, they're a learner. Now, there are any number of strategies and tactics, but for many, reading has made it to the top of the list. And I found an author that wrote about that not long ago. And the premise was, they were trying to figure out, why are so many readers leaders? No, I said that backwards. Why are so many leaders readers? We know they're all learners, but many of them have chosen that as their primary way to intake information. And it's because it's the most efficient. You can read much faster than you can listen. So, I mean, I do a lot of audiobooks, but I got into that because I spend so much time in the car. And even if you turn them up a little bit, sound like the chipmunks, and you still can't listen as fast as you can read. Now, that's true for most people. Some of you would say, well, I'm a slow reader. Yeah, but reading is a skill and you can learn to read faster. And so you may choose any number of strategies, and it might be reading, it might be audio, it might be time with coaches and mentors and peers. Oh, and by the way, these are not mutually exclusive, right? You probably could do a combination of things. But I find that reading is probably the quickest way for leaders to get more information, to get new information that they wouldn't otherwise have.
I know we're both big fans of reading, and we could say we probably ought to do an episode on the power of reading at some point as well. But I think there is the quantity of reading. We can read more by some of the tips you gave there. But I also like not that if you read fast, it can't be quality. It can be, but I also like the idea of reading slow, reading fast, like you're talking about, and also reading slow. Maybe setting aside 30 minutes on your calendar to get a book and open it up and a highlighter. And I think one of the powerful things about reading, and I think it helps leaders it gives me a chance to really think about what I'm reading and the process. And I don't even, the goal is not to read the whole book. The goal might just be to read something to help me think more. And so when we think about mentally, you've talked about margin to pull back and to assess and to plan and to think and to dream. And we could give lots of things that could happen in those spaces that we could create. But I love the mental adjustments going into the second quarter. There's some things that I'm really trying to put on my schedule that I had them on my schedule, and a couple of them got blipped off. And I'm like, I've got to take time to really lock in on this, because if you don't tell your time where to go, somebody else will. And I think this is really important opportunity for us to make an adjustment, or a time. I say an opportunity. It's a time to make an adjustment right now. You don't want to wait and get down to, September, let's say, and think, I wish I'd read more the first part of the year, or anything else that we're talking about. So that the mental side of it is really big.
All right, let me say just a couple of quick things. We probably do need to do a separate episode on reading, but I want to say a couple things. One, to your point about reading slow and with a highlighter, one of my mentors challenged me decades ago. He said, if you have an hour to read, he said, you should take 30 minutes to read, and you take the next 30 minutes to figure out how to apply what you just read. Now, I can't say I always do that, but I think there's so much wisdom there. To your point, the objective is not to read the book. And the objective in my mind is often not just to understand what's in the book, but it's for the book to inform and help you do better, whatever you're trying to do. Now, that's assuming we're not talking about reading a novel. We're talking about reading a book that would help you or those around you pursue whatever you're pursuing. Ultimately, the acid test of the value of the book is going to be, how does it impact behavior?
Yeah.
So that's
am I just to use our framework and our language? Am I becoming a better leader? I mean, ultimately, that's what anything I'm doing, I would want to help me with that. So that's good. Okay, one more
last thought on reading.
Go ahead.
Last thought on reading. I know we got to go. There's a book, and we're not doing our book review today on this book, because half of you who read this may not like it, but I'm going to just give it to you. It's called How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. And I don't know, Randy, that book's probably 80 years old, and it's written like an 80-year-old book. But why is it still in print? Because it's full of truth. And if I could oversimplify the idea, the big idea of the book is that there are different forms and types of reading depending on your goals and objectives. And think of it like a bike, a 10-speed bike. Well, most of us go through our life in first gear. And he calls that elementary reading. And it's what we learned in elementary school. And we read one word at a time, and we sound it out. And that's how we learn to read. Well, if you're still reading that way in every situation, you're a slow reader. But he outlines several other different forms of reading for different purposes, each one with its own strategies and techniques. And so, again, probably an 80-year-old book, but you may find it life-changing.
We've got to move beyond see, spot, run. You'll know what I'm talking about. People who are listening now won't know, but that's the way we learn. So that's good. Okay, so one more area, and I want you to talk about this just for a second. Let's don't forget vocationally. I know we spend most of our time thinking about leadership and stuff, but this feels like a good time for me, Mark, if I'm a leader, to think about my team, my own leadership at work, but our alignment, our culture, anything you want to say about our organizational stuff, like you got a thought on an adjustment, how you would think about it. I know you've done quarterly plans and some of that kind of stuff through the years. Like, how do you navigate some of that if you're the leader listening and you're going, things aren't just off, they're just not off to the start we thought they would be. We feel like we maybe are behind here after the first quarter. Got a thought for that leader?
Yeah, I'll say just a little bit. And you and I would argue, or speak for myself, I think I've got new clarity, and you helped with this. We're working on a book that's going to be out in September called Lead Every Day. And we've identified 3 disciplines that every leader should care about. And the first, which is what we've talked about thus far, is how to become a better leader. The second thing is how to improve team performance. And the third thing is how to strengthen your organization. And so I think just the awareness of these disciplines as you begin quarter two, I think you can ask yourself, are there things that we need to do to improve our team performance? And if so, what are they? And are there things that we can do better or differently, more or less of in the second quarter than we did in the first quarter that would strengthen our organization? I think just the awareness and the language and the focus on those two additional disciplines, I think could be transformational.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Okay, so I want to give a nod here. We're not going to put it as another category, but I'm going to just give a nod here to the spiritual side of our lives, and I want to share something I ran across in the last couple of days, a verse from the Bible. I love this verse. It's from Isaiah. There's a prophet named Isaiah, and here's what he wrote. It's from Isaiah chapter 30, verse 15. It says this: "In quietness and trust is your strength." This is what he says. This is what God says: "In quietness and trust is your strength." And it's made me start thinking about, if I'm quiet and I'm like how would I relate that to this conversation? If I have clarity, if I'm true to my values for that leader, but let's don't miss the fact I need to be quiet some. What I wrote down here when I was reading that verse was, if there's noise in my life and there's doubt or there's a lack of clarity, I'm not going to be as strong as I could be. Again, we could think about that from a spiritual standpoint. So anybody who's listening, I don't want you to neglect that there is this side of your life, call it what you want, your soul, whatever, where maybe it's your emotions, you want to think of it that way. But if you're not, the language we use sometimes, if you're not buoyant, like you get on a lake and you see the buoys, there's water coming over them, but they keep coming back up. They're afloat. And I want to remind any leader, if you've got noise going on right now in your system and you don't take time to think through what you want to happen in the next quarter, there's a good chance you're going to get to halftime and you're going to be further behind than you are now, because you didn't spend any time in quiet. You didn't return back to your values, the things, that you can really trust to be true. And so I don't want to move on without or leave today without saying there is a spiritual side to your leadership. And I would encourage you to give some thought to that. So I'll leave that there. We've got a book here, Mark, that you and I read, I don't know how many years ago it's been, I guess when it first came out, but I've actually got it on my list to reread it this year. It's called The 12-Week Year. And I know you're a fan of this book as well. And I love the subtitle: "Get More Done in 12 Weeks Than Others Do in 12 Months." That's a great subtitle. But I want to remind people listening, the goal is not necessarily to get things done. So I'm not a fan of let's just be busy. If we're not careful, we can pack, it don't matter if it's 12 weeks or 52 weeks, we can pack it full of activities and maybe not accomplish the things that we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's why it's so important for us to give thought to our vision and our values and the things that we're really trying to do, that we're going to get to the end of the year and be proud of. But I love this book. It's written by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington. It was such a good read. And I want to just read a couple of sentences here from it that I thought, to me, this sort of sums up the ideology behind it. He says, let me back up half step. They call it the 12-week plan because they think the 13th week every quarter is a week to plan your next 12 weeks. So I love that they're kind of like we're talking about. They say this is not an annual plan. And so I like the idea of an annual plan, but I also hear where they're coming from. They're like, forget the annual plan, come up with a 12-week plan, and then every quarter take a week and plan the next 12 weeks. And so it's a different way, did a little bit of a different twist here. But they say this, we're not talking about quarterly planning. With 12-week planning, every 12 weeks stands alone. Every 12 weeks is a new year and a fresh opportunity to be great. So I love that mindset. But let me go back to something you said earlier in the conversation, Mark, about your goals and some of the things that you're giving some more intensity to. one of the things that these guys say in this book is, if you're thinking about goals, identify the top 1 to 3 things that'll have the greatest impact in your life over the next 12 weeks and pursue those with intensity. I think there's so much power in that extra focus on 1 or 2 things like we've been talking about today. And maybe if a person's listening, they would just choose one area in each of these, we'll call them domains that we've talked about, the physical, relational, emotional, mental, vocational, even spiritual. Pick one thing in each of them and make one little adjustment. And it's amazing, Mark, over time, those little adjustments add up into a big life, if you ask me. And so I think that's a powerful reminder from these guys. But they say treating your 12 weeks as a year, you create more immediate deadlines, greater focus, faster feedback loops, all kind of things. A couple other things that they talk about is setting specific measurable goals every 12 weeks, taking ownership of your results. Another thing that they wrote, I highlighted in here. I want to read one more to you. In the end, they say, and this, you made me think about this at the beginning when you were talking. They said, in the end, you have greater control over your actions than you do your results. So it goes back to what I was saying. There's going to be some resistance. Things are never going to go as planned. But if you have a plan and you stick to the plan, I'm just a big believer in you've got a better shot of things turning out closer to how you want them to. So I don't know. I would recommend everybody to this book will push you to think, and it'll maybe even cause you to take some different actions as you think about your planning and even your life and leadership. And so the 12-week year, I would encourage people to pick up a copy and give it a read. You may have other thoughts there on that, Mark. I know you've read it and you're a fan as well, but
you covered it well.
That's a good one. So, okay, so let's land it today. Got a little call to action, or I said call to action. I got a reminder for folks. We haven't really talked about it yet, but you and I, Mark, did a survey a few weeks ago with our newsletter. And for anybody that's not subscribed to the newsletter, you can do that at leadeveryday.com. And we did a survey with our readers or our listeners and the people who subscribe, and ask them, what are the topics that you would like for us to talk about if we did a webinar? And so we have been requested to do a webinar on talent. I think a lot of organizations are struggling to find top talent. We've written about it in the Talent Magnet work. And so we're going to do a webinar, Mark, on April the 3rd at high noon. At Eastern time. It'll be a live webinar. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with you that day. We'll go 12 to 1, a 1 hour thing. And it's a paid event. It's a $97 event for people to come, but we're going to share with them, Mark, and you may want to give a preview. We're going to share with them what we found in our Talent Magnet research. We had an opportunity to talk to over 7,000 leaders from around the U.S. on what top talent looks for. We're going to share the same stuff that we created and shared with Chick-fil-A when you were doing that project. We're going to be able to share that on that webinar. And I think anybody that is out there, you're really trying to build an environment that's going to be an attractor of talent. You want to be the employer of choice, I might say it that way. You're not going to want to miss this webinar. So April 3rd, we'll put a link in the show notes to how to register. Mark, you want to, anything you want to do
just
to review that?
One point of clarity. We actually had over 7,000 individual contributors. This was different. We didn't talk to the leaders. We talked to the people we were trying to figure out what they wanted in their workplace experience. And we differentiated the group into 2 subsets: top talent, think like your A player, and typical talent, because we wanted to zero in on what is it top talent wants. And we now know that answer. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to share it on April 3rd. And so, yeah, $97, April 3rd, high noon. Register for it in the show notes. Hope you'll bring people from your team. It'll be a great eye opener for you if you're looking to become, like I said, the employer of choice. You want to be a place that is like a magnet to top talent. You're going to want to check that out on April 3rd. So we'll be with you for that. Okay, thanks for joining us today. Lots to think about. Mark, I'm gonna be looking for you to make some adjustments here in Q2. I'm doing the same thing. I know our listeners got some ideas today. I hope everyone that's listening will really, you'll take seriously the opportunity you have we have 9 days here till the end of the first quarter to really maybe carve out some time on your calendar and think through, what do you want to be different going forward? I think you behave your way to high performance. We say you practice your way to where you want to go. And so let's work on that these next few weeks. And I think Q2 could exceed your expectations as you go into the middle part of the year. All right. We love you guys. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.